When I moved, it was pretty quiet until one day I'm in my apartment with my husband, fiance at the time, and I get a phone call from my mom. And it was like a Sunday afternoon, and she normally doesn't just call me out of the blue. She'll always text me and say, "Hey, sweetie, like, you want to chat on the phone?" She'll never just call me up. So for her to just call me up was a little strange, so I answer the phone, and she says, "Sweetie, you gotta listen." I said, "Okay, Mom, what's going on?" She said, "He just came over, he sat in the living room, and he told me and your dad that he is Jesus Christ, and you are Eve, and he is gonna come get his Eve. And if he can't have his Eve, then no one can have his Eve. So either he's gonna take me back, or he's going to kill my husband and kill me too if I don't have him."
I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. On today's episode of Strictly Stalking, we're chatting with Bethany, who met her stalker when she was just 14 years old.
Bethany begins dating a friend of her older brother's who starts to get too serious quickly in their relationship.
After their 7 months together, she breaks up with him and begins seeing other people.
Bethany's ex-boyfriend becomes obsessed with her, harassing her over the phone, showing up to her parents' house drunk and crying, and begging her to take him back.
He eventually works his way back into her life by convincing her that he just needs a friend.
And that's when he begins tracking her every move, interrogating her, and eventually threatening her life. Bethany, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
What was life like for you right before you met your stalker?
I met my stalker when I was 14, the summer before I went into high school. So life before I met him, I would say, was pretty normal. I grew up in the suburbs of a West Coast city with my brother and my two parents. And I remember having a really good childhood. I don't remember there being anything that I could recall that was enjoyable, but things quickly changed as I went from being a kid into a teenager, which was the same time that I met my stalker.
And what was your first impression of him?
I first met my stalker through my brother. My brother at the time liked to skateboard, and so I would hang out with him at the skateboard park. And he had a friend that he would meet there. He was quite a bit older than my brother and I. My brother's a year older than me, and he was then again 3 years older than that. So he was 17, I was 14. He seemed really cool. He was kind of like, I don't want to say like he was the bad guy, but he was kind of like that cool kind of, like he doesn't really care what people think of him. And I think at 14, when you're young and you're kind of struggling to find who you are, you meet somebody that's cool and doesn't really care. You're kind of like, that's awesome. And so my first impression of him was that he was this cool, down-to-earth guy. From the get-go, it was really clear that he kind of had a like screw the man, like don't tell me what to do kind of attitude. He was like, he couldn't be tamed. He was definitely kind of like a wild card. So when I first met him, I didn't think much of it. Here's 14-year-old me. Here's a 17-year-old guy. In retrospect, I should have known better. It's kind of a red flag from like a 17-year-old to a 14-year-old. As an adult, 3 years isn't a big deal, but as a teenager, that's a huge deal. That's the difference between a senior and a freshman, right? So I should have seen that it was a little strange, maybe, that there was this older guy interested in young little me. But I was 14 and I was like, it's cool. Like, this cool guy likes me. Like, all right. And so as I hung out with my brother and him, me and him started dating, I believe, once I started high school that following fall.
What did your parents think of him?
Well, he came from a broken home. His dad had a pretty substantial record with the police. His mom was a nice lady, but wasn't really what I'd say a functioning member of society. She didn't work. So he was kind of from a broken background. And my mom or my dad are both very compassionate people. And they really kind of took a lot of my brother's like misfit friends kind of under their wing and treated them like a part of the family, like second kids. So he kind of fell into that broken home, needing like to be loved, nurtured. So my parents kind of saw him as like, oh, here's this kid who's friends with, our son, and my daughter they want to date my daughter. And so I think they kind of saw him as, I don't want to say a project, but as a kid that needed a good home. And they knew that that was me, that was my brother, that was them, that they could care for him and take care of him, at that very important age of being a teenager before you go on to being adult is really, I think, when you need a lot of attention from parents. And so I think that they saw him as somebody that they could help and be compassionate towards.
Tell us about the first couple months in your relationship with him.
So the first couple months in our relationship, everything started moving really quick. I was 14, like I said. He got really serious really fast. I mean, he would be talking about getting married, a month or two into us dating. And he was always around because not only was my brother's friends we were dating, he didn't want to go home to his kind of broken home. So he spent a lot of time at our house. I would go up to my room, but he would maybe stay the night downstairs. We had a basement with a TV and a couch. And him and my brother would hang out late at night. And so to me, it was kind of like, this is really heavy. Being 14 years old, you get your first real boyfriend. You're not really thinking like, ooh, let's sign the marriage papers. You're kind of just wanting to enjoy dating life. And so to me, it was uncomfortable. And I think that inside I had that gut reaction of this isn't right and there's something wrong here. And so the first few months, I think it became clear quickly that it wasn't a good situation for me. But I think, again, in my young naivety, I didn't really know how to handle it. And I thought maybe I was just uncomfortable. This is my first real relationship. So I kind of let it go on for a while longer than I should have. But it was clear very quickly within the first month or two that things were not normal and it didn't feel right to me.
Did anyone else in your life sense that you were having problems in the relationship?
I think that my mom picked up on it a little bit, but I was pretty private about how I felt about things, especially as a teenager. I didn't really share necessarily all my struggles I was going through with my parents or with my mom because I wanted to be a big kid. I didn't want to make my problems their problems. And so I think she realized that things weren't quite right and it was a little bit strange how things were progressing. And at one point I did tell her, like, I don't want to be in this relationship with this guy. I feel like I'm signing up to get married and I'm barely 14 going on 15. It doesn't feel right. And they supported that and they understood. But I wasn't very communicative with the people around me. So people might not have picked up on things as much as I had hoped they would, but that would be my fault for not being more honest about it.
When did you decide to break it off?
After about 6 or 7 months, when I just couldn't really take it anymore, I decided to tell him, hey, things are really serious. I was 15 by the time we broke up. So 14, turned 15 while dating, broke up when I was 15. I told him how I felt. I just said, this is too heavy. This is too fast. I feel like we're already married. You're always around. You're always here. I'm 15. I just want to enjoy being a teenager. I want to join high school. I want to see other people. Like, I'm not ready for this right now. And at first he kind of seemed understanding. Like, he seemed to get it, but it was almost like he was in denial. He almost had this like, oh, you'll come around or you'll change your mind kind of attitude.
How did he take it when you broke up with him?
So when I broke up with him, he seemed okay at first. I'd say like the first day or two, he was like, okay, yeah, I understand. But then things didn't change. He was still around all the time. He was still hanging out with my brother. He'd still want to hang out with me, play games, watch TV, whatever we did at that age. And then I'd have to repeat to him, hey, like, no, I'm serious. Like, I don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore. And I think he almost thought of it as like, okay, we'll just be like friends with benefits, or like, oh, she's just going through a thing, we're on a break, that kind of thing. And so at first it was fine. But as soon as I started putting my foot down and saying like, no, we're not in a relationship, and then I decided to start dating other people, that's when things took a turn for the worst.
What was life like during your relationship? Were there good and bad points, or was it mostly downhill from the beginning?
There were definitely good and bad points. I don't want to say that it was all bad. Like I said, he was kind of the cool guy. He was kind of the fun kid. He was kind of a rebel. And I think I was attracted to the side of him that was just kind of a free spirit. I love my parents and I love my upbringing, but I was raised a little bit sheltered and I didn't really have any wild life. Like, I was 14. And so I think that the things that I got to do with him were fun. He had a car, he drove. My parents were okay with me hanging out with him when we were dating. And so we'd do fun things together. He'd take me places I wouldn't normally go. We'd go to the movies. We'd sneak into R-rated films because I couldn't see them at 14. And so there were definitely high points. There were fun times with him, but I would say that the bad times just outweighed the fun. It was just really, really, really heavy is the best way to explain it. And so even in the fun moments, for every fun moment, there was 10 of, oh, this isn't right kind of feelings or kind of moments that I had.
When did you realize he was stalking you?
It was pretty obvious that he was stalking me as soon as I started putting my foot down, as I said before, and dating other people is when it got really bad. That's when the phone calls would start. He would call me incessantly all day, every single day, leave me voicemails, text me, all this stuff. One voicemail I get would be something along the lines of, how could you do this to me? Like, how dare you date other people? You're so mean. Like, you broke my heart. How could you do this to me? And then 5 minutes later, I'd get another voicemail where he's apologizing. Oh, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I'll do anything it takes. He would say absolutely crazy things. Like, he would go on these fueled Google searches of different kinds of drugs he could take to change his personality so that he would be good enough for me. And he would say, hey, I just found out that I could take XYZ medication and I think that would really solve our problems. And that's when I started to really get, I think, overwhelmed, and I sort of shut down a bit, and it was emotionally numbing, but it sort of became like a part of my life because this carried on for months and years, when he would just call me, message me. And then if that wasn't enough, there were many times where he would show up at my house. Like I said, he had a car. And so I would come home from school to find him parked in his car across the street, staring into my living room window. Or worse, he would be pacing the neighborhood back and forth. I could see him across the street, just pacing, crying. He would come up the stairs, because we had stairs up to our door, come up the stairs, open the front door, run up, yell, scream, cry, something, grab his head in frustration, like, ugh, and then just run out again. Or I'd come home and he'd be hanging out with my brother, but really he was in the basement by himself, just crying and screaming and going on and going on. And so that was like another layer on top of just being bothered through my phone, was that he physically was showing up at my house, crying, throwing fits, parking his car and staring at me through the window. Once I started driving, and this went on for a while because I was 15, I got my license and I got a car as soon as I could when I was 16. There would be times where my mom would call me and say, you can't come home right now. He's parked outside. And so I would go and find something to do until my mom called me again and say, okay, he finally left. It's safe. You can come home now. And because he knew that we could see him, he would change where he'd park. Maybe one day he'd be across the street. The next day we lived next to a park, he'd be parked in the park. He would just always be around, maybe in my high school parking lot, maybe somewhere he would just show up.
Whether you're working from home or working on your fitness routine, you'll want what you're listening to be what you're listening to, not what the people around you are listening to.
I recently had some new neighbors move in right next door to me, and I hear everything all night long. Now I just pop my new Raycon earbuds in, and I'm off to dreamland while I listen to my favorite podcast or ocean sounds or music.
Everyone needs a great pair of wireless earbuds, but before you go dropping hundreds of dollars on a pair, you'll need to check out the wireless earbuds from Raycon.
You already know Raycon earbuds start at about half the price of any other premium wireless earbuds on the market, and they sound just as amazing as other top brands.
Their newest model, the Everyday E25 earbuds, are the best ones yet, with 6 hours of playtime, seamless Bluetooth pairing, more bass, and more compact design that gives you a nice, noise-isolating fit.
Raycon's wireless earbuds are so comfortable, perfect for conference calls or binging your favorite podcasts. Relaxing and listening to my favorite podcast without hearing dogs barking and neighbors talking is a game changer for me.
Unlike some of your other wireless options, Raycon earbuds are both stylish and discreet, with no dangling wires or stems to distract anyone during video calls.
The company was co-founded by Ray J, and celebrities like Snoop Dogg are obsessed. If the DOGG is down, you know it's for real.
Pick a pair and see what the hype is all about.
Now's the time to get the latest and greatest from Raycon. Get 15% off your order at buyraycon.com/stalking.
That's buyraycon.com/stalking for 15% off Raycon wireless earbuds. buyraycon.com/stalking.
How did your parents react to this behavior that he was showing?
I don't think my parents really knew how to react to what was happening. I think on one hand, here's a kid that's friends with their son, but also somebody that dated their daughter, and he's showing up for what reasons? Is he here to harass me? Is he here to hang out with my brother? I'm not sure they really knew how to handle it. And so we never got the police involved. We never called anybody because I don't know that we thought anybody would help us. We thought it might be a situation where we say, hey, this guy's bothering my daughter. And this was before, social media was so huge. We had Facebook, but this was way before cyber stalking laws and things like that kind of came into effect, where we're very aware of it these days, but we weren't so much, these 15 years ago when this happened. And so I'm not sure they knew how to handle it. They wanted to take care of this kid. They saw this broken kid and clearly has some problems. And I think that they wanted to, being the people they are, as I mentioned before, wanted to kind of help him. But I don't know, how do you draw the line between helping somebody else and taking care and protecting your kid? And I did a good job of not necessarily always telling my mom, like, oh, he's calling again. Oh, he left me a voicemail again. I kind of took it on as my burden to bear, and I kind of buried it and just dealt with it myself. And so I don't know that they knew how to really deal with that kind of situation. I don't think there's any, when your daughter gets a stalker handbook,
Did any of your high school friends know that this was going on?
They did. So my close-knit circle of friends, actually my best friend at the time was dating my stalker's best friend. And so that got a little bit awkward at times, because I believe that I broke up with my stalker before she broke up with her boyfriend. And so there was a little bit of an overlap when that happened. And so when she ended up breaking with him and we were both, broken up with these guys, I told them everything that was going on. And I said, oh, he's calling me, he's bothering me. He's showing up at my house. He's getting really jealous and saying crazy things. So they were aware of it, but I only maybe told that one best friend and maybe one other best friend. But as time went on and I had other friends or other groups of circles of people, it was kind of something that was like, oh yeah, and by the way, there's this crazy guy that follows me around who might show up, he might talk to you, he might not. And it's almost like I had to live my life like warning people around me in high school as the years went on. Oh yeah, by the way, I have this baggage. I have this stalker, this guy that constantly bothers me, emotionally abuses me, comes to my house, manipulates me, things like that. So even though people were aware, I think we were all kind of in that same boat of, we're really young. None of us really knew how to deal with something like that. And so I think we kind of chalked it up to, at least my friends chalked it up to, it's just a really bad breakup. But I, in retrospect, know that that's not the case.
So what kind of toll did this take on your schoolwork and your extracurricular activities and things like that?
I think it took a toll more than I was consciously aware of. My academics definitely suffered. They suffered out of an attitude that I sort of developed as a teenager. I think because of this, I don't know if I was aware at the time, but looking back, I realized it's because of the situation that I had developed this kind of, I've got bigger issues than my math homework kind of attitude. And so I kind of developed this, high school isn't real life. None of this matters in the grand scheme of things. And so I definitely let my academics slide. I wasn't feeling like dealing with my essay on Romeo and Juliet was anywhere near as important as just having some peace to myself, some quiet time away from my stalker to have like emotional stability. So it definitely affected my academics in that aspect. And it affected my relationships, as I had touched on earlier. I had to tell every new boyfriend, every new friend, every new person that I met why my phone was going off, for 20 minutes straight. It's the same person. I have 3 voicemails and texts and all this stuff. And I had to find ways to, rationalize it away or just be like, oh yeah, that's him, and it definitely made me, at least like in a friendship relationship kind of way, hesitant of who I let into my life, because I didn't want to be judged by other people that I had this person. But also I felt for some reason like it was my fault. Like all this stuff was happening to me because I broke up with him. So I must be so cold. I must be such a heartbreaking person. I can't believe I hurt somebody so bad that they would do something like this. And so I mostly just felt guilty, and I carried a lot of guilt with me, even though I know that what he did to me and the things that he did and said and how he reacted are not my fault. I can't control how other people react to what I do. At the time, I was so young, at such a emotionally malleable age, that it just kind of turned into this is my fault. This is my burden to bear. There's nothing I can do about it. And I carried that around for a really long time. When I was about 17, he joined the military. And so he decided to go into the military. He had dropped out of high school. I think that they had some agreement with him that they would get him some kind of GED if he did amount of time. And so around the time that this happened, when I was 17, I actually left high school early and went to college at 17. So it kind of coincided with the same timeline. He joined the military, and because he had a broken home, he didn't really have anybody he claimed that he could trust. He asked me for a favor to watch over his finances while he was gone. And so I kind of begrudgingly agreed to take care of his finances while he was gone. And in return for me doing this favor for him, he gave me a little bit of money. And how he did that was that he had a credit card. It had a really low limit on it, but he said, okay, here's my bank information. I put you as a card holder on my bank account. Like, please take, I don't know, a few bucks a month and buy whatever you want, just as a way of me saying thank you for watching over my stuff while I'm gone. So here I am, 16, 17 years old, thinking, okay, cool, like it's a gift, like, yeah, it's a burden for me to, everything you've done to me, the least you can do is give me, some money, right, for taking care of yet again more things for you, right? And so I would then use my credit card, and he would immediately call me after every transaction, harassing me, saying, hey, I saw that you just spent $30 at the Olive Garden. What are you doing at the Olive Garden? Who are you there with? You better not be there with a boyfriend. Well, what friend are you there with? How come you can't tell me the name of the person you're with? Oh, I see you went to the mall today. What did you buy? You better not have bought whatever it is I wasn't allowed to buy in his mind, right? And so this was yet another layer of him manipulating me, keeping tabs on me, knowing what I'm doing. And I didn't even see it coming. I was like blindsided by this favor that was really just a way of him controlling my life and being in my life again. And so I stopped using that credit card, and I stopped using it and taking, anything from him. But that happened when I was about 17, about the time I left high school and went into college.
Did you feel at the time that when he gave you the credit card that he was trying to control you?
I think I maybe in the back of my mind felt like uneasy about it. I don't know if I was aware that he was going to use it as a way to control me. I was still kind of under that feeling of guilt of, okay, I'm just trying to help him out. I'm just trying to be a nice person. I don't think I was aware of the extent he was going to use it to keep tabs on me, uh, and harass me, manipulate my life. That didn't come to mind when it happened. In retrospect, I should have known better, but I was pretty young, right? I felt nervous. It seemed strange that me, 17-year-old person, would take care of someone's finances while they go, across the world to be in the military. But I think a part of me was also kind of like, cool, like I have a credit card, which is naive, and I'm aware of it now. But it was a double-edged sword of feeling like this is kind of wrong and I don't understand, but everything that I ever did for him always came back to that guilt. It always came back to this guilt that I had instilled in myself unbeknowingly, that for some reason I owed him something.
Did anyone else in your life know that you were still connected to him?
My parents knew, and my friends, some of my close friends knew. I did have one friend that wasn't from high school, but was from youth group. And so she knew about the situation, and she was there for me quite a bit. But as time went on, and I just kind of, as I said before, kind of treat it as like a burden to bear, I kind of just stopped necessarily reporting it to people that, he was harassing me through whatever, Facebook messages, text, phone calls. So even if people were aware of it, I don't think it was until later in my life that it got so bad to the extent where other people would start to step in and try and do something about it.
What ultimately happened with the credit card situation?
Ultimately, he actually got discharged from the military. I don't know all the circumstances around it, but it was a little suspicious because one day he was in the military and then one day he wasn't. And he was home and he's trying to get his stuff back. So I very willingly gave him his stuff back, and I asked him to take me off the credit card. I didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't want to be a part of it. So I said, please take me off the credit card. I called his bank. He called the bank allegedly to take me off his credit card. And I stopped using it. And it was okay for a while. But then I think it was a year or two after that, suddenly I started getting collection calls from his bank asking for him on my phone number saying, hey, you owe us money. I would get letters saying that I owed them collection debts because I was on the account. And so I don't think he ever removed me from the account. I remember when I moved out on my own for the first time, going to check my credit because I wanted to rent an apartment. And I'd get this, oh, no, sorry, we can't rent you. Your credit's terrible. And so I pulled a credit score and it was horrendous. I was like the worst you could get. It was so bad. It was worse than having no credit. So I spent years trying to build up my credit. Even to this day, I now live, across the border. I keep a credit card open in the States just so that I can try to recover my credit now, 15 years after this has happened.
Basically, after the credit card situation was resolved, what were his next steps? What else did he do?
To be honest, there's kind of a blur. I think all of the time between the credit card, him coming back, there were moments of peace and there were moments of him bothering me. He actually got into an accident on my family's property, not my parents' house, but my grandparents' house, because my brother and him, they all like to do, ATVing and dirt bike riding. They had repaired a dirt bike and they're driving it around my grandpa's property at some acreage. And he went 60 miles an hour head first into a tree. And he ended up in the ICU for, I think it was about a month or two. And this was around the time I was, I want to say 18 or so. And I remember getting a phone call. Hey, he's in the hospital. He's asking for you. And my stomach just sank. Why is he in the hospital? Why is he asking for me? Yet again, another way to make me feel guilty, to feel like I owe him to something. So my brother, my mom, and I, all three of us go down to the ICU to see him. And the nurse says, he's asking for you, he's asking for you, he's asking for you. And I'm like, fine, I'll go see him, whatever. And so I go see him. He's in the ICU. He's not even conscious. Like he's gone. He's just mumbling. He's not with it. He's gone wrong. He's had a brain injury, right? And so I come and I say hi, like I'm here. And he doesn't even realize I'm there, right? So I refuse to go back to the ICU. I said, no, I don't want to see him again. I don't want to be any part of this. So once he actually survived, and I hate to say this, I feel terrible saying this, but part of me hoped he didn't. Part of me hoped that he didn't survive his brain injury because it would mean that I would finally have peace. I'd have some kind of closure to this. And that's terrible to say. And I feel horrible saying it now, that someone else's life, would mean my peace. And I would never wish that on anybody. But a part of me, I'd be lying if I didn't say a part of me was almost relieved here that maybe he wasn't going to make it. But he did end up making it. And he was very different after that. He got into doing some drugs, I think methamphetamines, definitely marijuana, shrooms, things like that. And he completely changed. His personality completely changed. He would go off on these insane drug-fueled rants. He would call me and he would tell me that he's been in touch with the other side, that he's spoken to aliens. If I would just open my mind, that I too could be a part of this. Just that kind of things that happens after lots of drug abuse. And so they're in that section of life between about 18 and 20 after this happened. I would have maybe a few months of peace where I wouldn't hear from him. I don't know where he was, if he's off on some drug-induced escapade, who knows, right? So I'd have peace, but then when he came back with a vengeance. It would be the crazy rants. It would be, hey, I need a ride somewhere. Can you come pick me up? And I didn't want to go anywhere with him. I didn't want to be alone with him. So I would always see if I could get someone to come with me, maybe my brother or another friend. I didn't want to be anywhere near alone with this man, right? Not only has he physically and emotionally abused me for years, he's now put hard drugs in the mix, has a brain injury. There's all these layers of things that are going even more wrong than they were before. And so for that time, there was peace here and there. But when there wasn't peace, there was really not peace.
After his recovery, did you think that you had heard the last from him?
I definitely thought that was probably the end of it. I'd hoped that was the end of it. I kind of, if he made it through, I hope that he would wake up a different person. I'd hope he'd wake up somebody that I could call a friend and mean it, because it was clear I wasn't getting him out of my life. And so I hope that maybe he'd wake up and he wouldn't want anything to do with me. Maybe he was now into hiking and he was going to move to Nevada. I don't know. I hope that he'd wake up and be a different person and not want me to be in his life. I hope that near-death experience would wake him up and show him that the way he's gone about trying to be with me or convince me to be his partner was not right. And, wow, I almost died. Maybe I can get my life in perspective, but that's definitely not what happened at all.
What was the reaction from some of the other people that you were seeing during this time?
I honestly did not really have any long-term relationships at all between that happening and later in life. Most of my relationships are very short, but I think that the people, at least the people that I dated that I had to tell about, if it lasted long enough for them to find out about him, most of the people kind of laughed it off. I think that I ended up dating a lot of the wrong kind of guys because of my what had happened to me, and I don't think that I really felt that I had any self-worth. I felt that not only have I been emotionally braided by somebody externally, I've been emotionally braiding myself, taking all this guilt on, taking in all this emotions that I don't think the average teenager, it's hard to be a teenager, but the average teenager probably doesn't go through something quite as extreme as this. And so I didn't end up being around a lot of people that were good for me. And so I think that the people that I were around that did know about it were the kind of people that were just like, that's funny, right? It's a funny story. That was the reaction I got from a lot of people is, oh, you have a stalker? Oh, that's, what did you do to him? I got a lot of those like, well, what did you do to the guy kind of responses. And things like that just like further reinforced my low self-worth, my guilt when people around me would react like that. So once I met my now husband, at the time boyfriend, we met online, and he happened to live in Canada. So he lived far enough away that I don't think maybe on a conscious level this was my plan, but it was almost like the perfect excuse to escape. It was a perfect excuse to escape my hometown, to escape my situation. And I couldn't move to Canada, but I could move very close to the border. And so that's exactly what I did. I packed up my bags. I moved very close to the border of Canada so that we could continue our relationship together. But mostly, I just really wanted to get away. And so even, and I don't want to say that like I used my husband or anything like that. That's not at all. It's just coincidental that it happened to be a good reason to get out. And so when I moved, it was pretty quiet until one day I'm in my apartment with my husband, boyfriend at the time, or sorry, fiance at the time. And I get a phone call from my mom. And it was like a Sunday afternoon. And she normally doesn't just call me out of the blue. She'll always text me and say, hey, sweetie, like, you want to chat on the phone. She'll never just call me up. So for her to just call me up was a little strange. So I answer the phone and she says, sweetie, you got to listen. I said, okay, mom, what's going on? She said, he just came over. He sat in the living room and he told me and your dad that he is Jesus Christ and you are Eve, and he is going to come get his Eve. And if he can't have his Eve, then no one can have his Eve. So either he's going to take me back or he's going to kill my husband and kill me too if I don't have him. When that happened, immediately afterwards, I sent my fiance back home. I said, go home right now. I don't know what's going to happen. He's made many threats to me before over the years. He's threatened to commit suicide. He's threatened to do all kinds of things to me that I will not even mention. But I told my husband, go home, like get across the border, because he had a record with the law, with the police. I knew that if he did try to cross the border, they would see that he has a criminal record and they would not let him into Canada. And so it was almost like a ticking time bomb of I could not move into Canada fast enough. At this point, we were engaged, we were legally married, but I hadn't had my visa come through to actually move. And so for those next few months in between getting that phone call from my mom and actually moving to Canada, I was an anxious wreck, thinking any day now he's going to show up at my front door. He's going to do something to me. He's going to try and find my fiance. This poor guy who, like, this isn't his fault at all, is going to be the victim of my crazy ex. Like, not just that he's going to be around annoying, like he's going to try and kill me and my husband. And I think that's probably the most terrified that I've ever been in my whole life, was those few months between that phone call and moving to Canada. I was terrified that he was going to come find me. I lived in a small town. It's not a big town, and there's nothing around for quite a few miles either way. So it wouldn't be that hard to snoop me out if he really wanted to. So I really just put my head down, did everything I could to just get through work, get my boxes packed. And then the day I knew I could move, I don't think I've ever packed up anything as fast as I did. I got my whole life in boxes, and I was up across the border within about a week.
When is the last time you've heard from him?
The last time I heard from my stalker was actually the week I moved to Canada. So I didn't hear anything from him between the phone call from my mom and me moving to Canada. Once I moved to Canada, I was sitting on my couch one night after work and I get a phone call. Normally, because of this situation, I do not answer the phone for unknown numbers. If you're not in my phone, I don't answer it. You can leave me a voicemail and I will call you right back, but I'm not going to pick up the phone for an unknown number. But because I just moved countries, there were a lot of loose ends I was still trying to tie up. So I thought maybe it could be my bank, maybe it could be my post box, it could be somebody trying to get a hold of me about something important, right? I just moved to a new country, so I answered the phone. And it was him. And I said, "Hello, this is Bethany." And he said, "Hi." And my gut sank. And I said, "Who is this?" Because I didn't actually recognize his voice at first. And he paused and goes, "You don't want to play that game with me. You know who this is." And I hang up the phone immediately. And of course, block the number. He calls me right back. I pick up. I don't say anything, but I pick up because I don't know. I don't know why I picked up, but I picked up. And I don't say anything, but he says, "Well, that wasn't very nice, was it? Why would you hang up on me? I just want to talk to you." Like in the creepiest voice I've ever heard, like absolutely insane. It was like something out of like a movie, like a crime movie, like, "Hey, I'm coming to kill your family." It was literally like that kind of voice. So I hang up again. I turn my phone off. I pull the SIM card out, literally huck it across the room, sit there in terror. And then I go tell my husband, "Hey, I just got a call from crazy." He's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yep, this is what just happened." We go to the store, buy a new phone, buy a new SIM card, and I have never touched that phone ever again.
What did you know about his previous arrest records?
Because he sort of was a rebel, when he started getting into drugs is when he started to get a record with the police. And so they would catch him, I think, with minor things like possession, but he would escalate it because he would refuse to cooperate. And so then he would try and fight the cop or wrestle the cop or threaten the cop. And then at one point, because his dad had a criminal record, his dad actually gets out of prison. And I don't know all the details, but I found out that they ended up hooking up together and doing very strange things together. And so they would both sort of end up on the radar of the police. And so because he had the criminal record, I knew, like I said, I knew that he couldn't cross the border, but I had found out about it because I think it was from the news, because there's a very suspicious situation where he and his father drove to a forest. His father gets out and they get out and they go to the forest together. And then he comes back, but his father was never found after that. And so it was on the news that this guy has disappeared into the forest, last seen with his son. And I don't know what happened to this day. I'm not sure if they ever found his dad, but it's just super suspicious situations like that that continue to build on his criminal record, because of course the police are going to get involved in a situation like that, right?
Did you ever get law enforcement involved?
I never did get law enforcement involved in my particular situation. I did almost call the police the day I got got the phone call from my mother. Because if you just got told someone's threatening to come murder you, why would you not call the police? But I was afraid that because I was so far away from my hometown, that they wouldn't help me, because my experience with the police in the past, not in this situation, but in other situations, was I would sort of get handed off to different people, right? Like, "Oh, you call the wrong department, we can't help you here," right? And I don't want to say anything bad about law enforcement, because obviously there's great people in law enforcement, but I just didn't think that they could help me. I didn't think they were going to do anything about it. I thought it would just sound ridiculous, and they would probably just give me the same response that other people gave me, is like, "Oh, what did you do to the guy?" Right? And I know now, after hearing your guys' podcast, after doing my own research, after years removed from the situation, that's not the case. I'm sure there were people that could have helped me, and I should have reached out, and I wish I did. but I just didn't think that they would do anything, or I just really didn't think that they'd believe me, or somehow that it would be my fault.
Is he still in contact with your family?
I don't believe so. I don't think my family has heard from him since the incident when he went to my parents' house and went on the crazy rant, as I call it. But every once in a while, I will look into the local jail bookings back in my hometown just to see what's going on, because if I find out that he's been incarcerated, he's been put in prison, at least I know that my family and me are safe. I don't necessarily worry about my safety too much now that I've got the border between us, but I do sometimes worry about my family's safety. So he hasn't been in contact with them for quite a while now, but I try to keep tabs on him from a distance just to see if my family's going to be okay. But that only goes so far, right? I have him blocked, and all his family or anybody associated with him in any way blocked on all of my social media, my phone, everything. So it's a little bit hard for me to figure out what's going on in his life without it being obvious that I'm trying to figure out what's going on in his life, because you can always see who's seen your stories and things like that, right?
Looking back on it now, is there any way you wish your family had offered more support throughout your process?
I think my family tried to be as supportive as they could, but I don't think they really knew what to do. I think it was not a situation that anybody was prepared to handle. And I love my parents and they care so much about me and they've done so much for me in my life. But I think that if I was to change anything, I just wish that maybe we would have gotten the law enforcement involved. I wish we would have sought out maybe some help or some guidance from somebody, whether that be, I don't know, is there a stalker hotline or whoever you could call for help, right? So I think that in that situation, in retrospect, that probably would have been a better way to handle it. But I don't fault anybody in my life for not knowing to do that, because, as I said, it's not a normal situation. And I think I just wish that maybe I knew that I wish that I had someone there to tell me, whether that be a therapist or a police officer or whoever that might be, that this isn't normal, but this isn't my fault. And I don't need to continue to feel guilty or carry this around or be in contact with this person, because his actions are not a result of something that I've done. You can't, no matter what you do, if someone decides to react that way, it's not your fault. And I just wish that I would have had somebody in my life who had maybe been through this or knew about this kind of situation to tell me that.
What advice would you have for someone who's being stalked?
My advice to someone who's being stalked is, do not try to deal with it on your own. Do not internalize it. First of all, don't blame yourself if you think that you've done something to deserve this behavior. You haven't. And two, reach out to somebody, tell the people around you. And if the people around you that you're telling aren't taking it seriously, or they think that you're just, crazy or it's funny, haha, it's not. Reach out to some professional person then. That's a hotline, if that's the law enforcement, if that's a therapist, find somebody who's going to believe you, take your situation seriously, confide in that person, and make an action plan to get away and to be safe.
What do you want to see happen to your stalker?
I don't wish anything bad upon my stalker. I can't speak for where he's coming from, but I really just wish that he could get some help. I think that he really needs some rehabilitation from his obvious addiction with substances, but also he clearly needs some mental help support as well. So I think the best thing I could wish for my stalker is I just hope he has peace. I hope he can get help, and I hope he has, if it's possible, a life where he's not burdened by the things he's turned to cope with how he's dealt with things, where he doesn't feel the need to treat people the way they treated me. And I hope no one else has been a victim of this. So I'd really like to see him just get some help, get better, and have a better life.
How did your life change from being stalked?
I think the biggest effect it's had on my life is just how I emotionally dealt with a lot of things, specifically with my own self-worth. I think since it happened to me from such a young age, I think that really carried over into most of my young adult and even into my mid-20s life, because at that age, you're developing so much emotionally. You're just finding out who you are. And if my first impression of who I am is that I'm going to be emotionally berated, stalked, harassed by somebody, it sort of set the tone for most of my life since then. And it hasn't been until the last few years that I got free of my situation, free of my stalker, and was with my husband, who showed me what it means to be in a valuable relationship, in a healthy relationship. I didn't have any real worth in myself. I sort of went from relationship to relationship, always thinking that this is as good as it's going to get. I dated a lot of not great guys. I ended up in another emotionally abusive relationship a few years down the road. And I think that it was just because I never thought that I deserved better. I always sort of felt like this happened to me for a reason. If this was happening to me, I must not be worth loving. I must not be worth being in a healthy relationship. This must just be the hand that life has dealt me. My life is just, I'm not one of those people that get to have like one of those Disney lives. I've done something, or something has happened to me that has made my life go this way. So that must just be how things have to be. And I think subconsciously and consciously in some ways carry that around, and that affected how I dealt with people in my life. You know, I didn't trust people a lot. Like, I'm pretty bubbly, I'm pretty outgoing, I'm pretty friendly, but there's a wall. You reach a point where I don't let people pass that certain wall because I'm scared, right? And so I think it emotionally damaged me in ways that have taken me years to recover from. And as I said, it's only been recently that I've really, really understood that I don't have to put my value in the things that happen to me in my life, that my life is what I choose to be. And I don't have to let my past, I don't have to let the things that have gone wrong in my life affect my future and the things that can go right in my life. And the choice is really mine to find value in myself, let people into my life, look for things to be happy about, and not just think that's how life is going to be. I don't think I really realized the depth of everything that happened to me until I started listening to other victim stories, until I started listening to a lot of people you've had on your show, that I really started to recall things that I think I buried deep down, that I didn't want to acknowledge, that I didn't want to think about. And so as I'm hearing some other of these victims talk about the things that happened to them, my brain's going, oh crap, yeah, I remember when this happened. Oh, yeah, that happened to me too. And then it wasn't until I told you guys my story or sent my story in that I really started to piece together all the things I think that happened over the years that I had kind of put out of my mind, that I had quite literally blacked out because I just couldn't deal with thinking about it.
Bethany, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate you listening to my story.
Thank you. If anyone out there is in need of help or is a victim of stalking, please reach out. You can find a list of resources on our Instagram at strictlystalkingpod.
You can watch all of our episodes at youtube.com/strictlystalkingpod. I'm Jake Deptula.
And I'm Jamie Beebe. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Strictly Stalking.